good, all you beautiful people out there. How y'all doing today? That is fantastic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Diesel Sports Podcast, the podcast where we talk everything National Football League in season off season. It doesn't matter because it's football. I am your host, Double Diesel, and welcome to today's show. Before we get into it, I would like to ask, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and share the content if you enjoy this and you know anybody else that might enjoy this. It really helps me boost my exposure and get some more eyes on the content. So if you haven't done that already and you would like to, please do so. It would mean the absolute world to me. Also, if you haven't already, go follow me on Twitter at DDS_pod. And also, if you'd like to, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. On there, you'll have exclusive content such as my weekly picks, and also some of my draft content that I will do in the offseason, which I will be starting fairly soon, or at least get started on fairly soon. I'm really excited for that, but we still got a bit for that before we really dive into that as far as the video making process for that kind of content goes. But if that seems like something you'd be interested in and you'd like to support this channel, please go do that on patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. The link to those will be in the description down below. But let's get on with the show. Now, quite a bit of talk about this week. Not necessarily from a game standpoint, but more so from a storyline standpoint. We are in the point of the season where things are starting to shape up a little more, where we're actually getting a more confident feel on what certain teams are like, who's real contenders and who aren't. But as far as actual games go from Week 13, nothing really to talk about from that standpoint, at least nothing that I want to talk about. The things I want to talk about in today's episode are more so just individual storyline standpoints. And I want to start off with the game that kicked off this week, and that is the Buffalo Bills taking on the New England Patriots in Foxborough. That was the game on Thursday Night Football to kick off Week 13. And a couple things to talk about from both perspectives. One, the Buffalo Bills are back. They are back. They have reestablished themselves as being one of the elite teams in the NFL. We kind of got a little worried about them in recent weeks as far as not looking like the Super Bowl favorites that they were at the beginning of the season. And even now, they are not necessarily deemed as the Super Bowl favorites that we were all confident that they were at the start of the year, especially now considering literally today that I'm recording this, news dropped not too long ago that Von Miller will be out for the remainder of the season. He will be getting ACL surgery, so his 2022 season is officially over, which is a huge blow to this team. You figured that defense that has still been really excellent, they were going to get some firepower back once Von got back. Now that they have Tre'Davious White back, and then figures, they get one star player back, and it's immediately they lose another one. But as far as the Bills go, they're back to being one of the elites of the league and one of the dominating forces of the league. Josh Allen is proved once again that he is, at least in my eyes, the best quarterback in football right now. And it's also nice to see that they're finally getting a running game established a little bit. That's really been the main criticism of this team over the past few years, is they're great in every other aspect except for the running game. They have all these running backs, and yet Josh Allen's still the best running back they got. And I said that's not going to be really sustainable. But they have Devin Singletary going a little bit. They're finally giving Nyheim Hines some offensive snaps. So it's nice to finally see that part of their offense finally find some kind of footing that isn't just Josh Allen. So other than that, they are the Buffalo Bills. They are what we know them to be, and they reestablished that on Thursday. The thing that I want to talk about the most from this game, however, was the opponent that they beat, and that is the New England Patriots. Those of you who know me, I am a New England Patriots fan myself. I am a ride-or-die Patriots fan for life. And so I feel like I, more so than a lot of people, will have more validity in saying the things that I am about to say. The problem with this team is not the talent. It's not the lack of talent. Because this offense, because that's really where the problems lie, is the offense. The defense is fine. Yes, they didn't have the greatest game the past couple of weeks, but they are still a really good defense. The problems with this team is offensively, and really it's only one key problem. Because you look at the talent on the team, the talent has a chance to be really effective when utilized properly. You look at guys like Devontae Parker, can be really, really good as a deep threat jump ball guy. Ramondre Stevenson is an animal. He is a monster. And if given full-time reps going into next year, we could be in a situation where at the end of next year, he can be viewed around the league as a legitimate top 10 running back. I really do believe that. You have Tyquan Thornton, their rookie second-round pick out of Baylor, still has not really seen the field that much. I don't know why, because we've been preaching of like this team needs speed, this offense needs speed, speed, speed. They finally have speed, and they're not using it. You have Jonnu Smith, who's one of the best run-after-catch threats in the NFL, and he's same boat. They just do not throw the football his way for some reason. So this team has people and has players that, when used, can be explosive playmakers. So why is it that this offense can't move the ball to save their lives and they just don't want to push the ball down the field? The problem is really one man and one man only. And that is Matt Patricia. Now, Patriots fans have been familiar with Matt Patricia. He was a longtime defensive coordinator here, and I and many other Pats fans were calling for him to be fired because his defenses were inconsistent at best and horrendously pitiful at worst. So when he left to take the head coaching job at Detroit, we rejoiced because we're like, yay, we don't have to see him and his stupid pencil ever again. Or so we thought. And then 2021 comes around. He gets fired from Detroit, gets brought back to New England as the quote-unquote senior football advisor. What that really means, I don't know. I can't tell you what the hell that actually means, but what it did matter was he was not part of the coaching staff, which was okay with me. And then this past offseason hits, where Josh McDaniels leaves to take the head coaching job in Las Vegas, and all of a sudden we don't have an offensive coordinator, and we have a second-year rookie quarterback who just came off a Pro Bowl season in his rookie year, has a lot of promise. Now it's time to build off of that. And instead, Bill Belichick does this weird thing where he takes Patricia and Joe Judge, who was brought back to New England fresh off of getting fired from the Giants, and basically said that they were co-coordinators, or they were splitting play calling duties. And no one really knew what that meant. No one knew what was about to happen. And then the season started, and it was clear, all right, Patricia is the play caller. And to say that it has been a failure, I feel like would be an understatement. Now, the play calling has been good at times. At times it's good, but it's just so frustrating where it feels like every single drive, it's run Ramondre up the middle, run Ramondre outside, throw the football short of the line to gain, punt the football, maybe get a few first downs on there somewhere, but then the second you reach the red zone, screw it. We have Nick Folk. Let him kick it. Doesn't matter. Touchdowns are overrated. And it's so frustrating because even though this team didn't really come into the season with a ton of expectations and didn't come in with a ton of hope, you would at least expect them to be better than 6-6 after week 13. You would at least expect that better out of a New England Patriots football team. And the only real reason it's like that is because of the man that's calling the plays. And I cannot, and Belichick, God bless him, he said on his radio show that it's too late now to make any changes, which is basically him acknowledging that, hey, Patricia has not worked out the way I thought he would. I mean, you saw the comments that Mac has made, where I'm sure everyone's seen it, the clip from Mac Jones during that game, where the camera caught him, and you can clear him see him mouthing, throw the ball, the fucking quick game sucks. Like, you see him saying that, and you know who that's directed at. You know who that's directed at. And you cannot, if you want to think that you have a shot at competing with the big boys next year, because you're not going to compete with the big boys this year. This year, even if you make the playoffs, they're one spot out of the 7th seed. Even if they fuck around and make the playoffs, they are not going to make it out of the first round. Because do you really think that this Patriots team, as it stands today, is good enough to beat the Kansas City Chiefs? Do you honestly think that this New England Patriots team is good enough to beat the Cincinnati Bengals? Do you honestly think this team is good enough to beat any of the other 3 teams remaining in our division? Because you know all 3 of them are pretty damn close, if not almost certain, to making the playoffs this year. Do you honestly think if we got into a rematch with any of those 3 teams, even the New York Jets, do you honestly think we're good enough to beat them? No. In my eyes, no, we're not. And why do I feel like that? I feel like that because of who's calling the plays. And had this been Bill O'Brien coming into the year as the play caller or as the offensive coordinator, I don't know how the offense would have looked, but I know damn sure we wouldn't be 6-6 after week 13. Shit, there were even talks in the offseason that Belichick was interested in bringing in Adam Gase as the offensive coordinator. Shit, even that I'd have been okay with, because it's like, hey, at least he's an offensive coach. His offenses aren't great by any stretch of the imagination, but shit, at least he's an offensive coach. So that's really the number one priority for this team going into the offseason is getting a real offensive coordinator. I don't know who, but he has to be a real offensive coordinator. It has to be a real offensive coach to call the plays. It has to be, because you cannot go into next year with Matt Patricia as your offensive play caller. You cannot. You can't. You cannot. This team's not going to go anywhere. Mac Jones' development is going to be horribly stunted if that is the case. So it's so frustrating because this team does have talent. They do have talented players that can be huge playmakers, and they just don't get utilized properly or don't get utilized at all. So that's all I wanted to say on that. It's incredibly frustrating, but it's because of the team's own doing. It's because Belichick had faith in Matt Patricia, and that faith just went completely out the window, and it blew up in his face. And I don't think Belichick was expecting it to blow up in his face, but it has. So it's time to swallow your pride and just admit this is a failure and hit the reset button for next year as far as who's calling the plays. Now, next thing I want to talk about is another AFC East team. One that has been making a lot of buzz in recent weeks, and that is the New York Jets. Not just because they're having a much better season than we had thought they were going to have at this point. Not because they have the best defense in the NFL, in my opinion. Not because Garrett Wilson is a stud in the making. He nearly had, 200 yards receiving almost against the Vikings in a game they nearly came back and won. But the reason why this team is so fascinating at this point is because of the quarterback situation. Mike White, I've already established that I'm a Patriots fan. I hate the Jets with a burning passion. But God damn it, I want my Mike effing White t-shirt now. I really freaking want one so badly. Not only because it's a cool looking shirt, but it's because it's so freaking funny. But also, it's because it kind of sums it up perfectly. It's like, hey, it's Mike effing White, man. He's a who would have known that he's a walking 300-yard passing game? Who would have known? But the reason why this is so fascinating is because Mike White is the epitome, him and another quarterback that I'm going to talk about fairly soon, is the epitome of a guy who was a late round pick. What was he, like a 5th round pick of the Cowboys? And got cut. Never started a game before last year. Never even took an offensive snap in an NFL game before last year. And we all know he had 400 yards passing in his first ever career start last year against the Bengals. Then things kind of teetered out. Didn't work out. Zach Wilson was put back in. But here we are with a New York Jets team that's ready to compete now. I just listed all the things at the start of this of why this team's ready to compete now. They have the defense. They have the talent offensively. They have the coach. All this team was missing was a quarterback. And they were hoping it was going to be their number 2 overall pick from last year's draft, Zach Wilson. And yeah, he was 5-2 as a starter. Like some of the, like Chris Sims will tell you, well, he was 5-2 as a starter. They were a 5-2 team with him under center in spite of him being under center. Not because of, he wasn't even in the category of he's a quarterback you win with, not a quarterback you win because. Zach Wilson wasn't even in that tier. Like, all Zach Wilson needed to do was be a decent quarterback and they were going to win games. He was a horrendous quarterback and they were still winning 5 games with him under center. So this was a team that they knew, and the 2 New England games were basically just, the games themselves weren't the nail in the coffin for Zach Wilson. It was his comments after the second New England game that was the nail in the coffin. And it showed because this upcoming week against the Buffalo Bills is going to be the 3rd straight week where Zach Wilson is going to be on the sideline with a jacket, hoodie, and an earpiece in. 3rd string quarterback for this 3rd straight week. Talk about a fall from grace. Like, it's unbelievable how much things can change in this league. But here we are with Mike White in as the starter. He's going into his 3rd game starting this year. A huge win against, oh gosh, I'm blanking. Who did he play in his first game? Oh gosh, oh God. Why? This is frustrating me. The Bears. That's who they played. They beat the Bears. They beat the hell out of the Bears, which was kind of expected. And then he nearly came back and beat the Minnesota Vikings. In fact, he was a Braxton Berrios drop away from beating the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. So he also had over 300 yards passing in that game as well. So he is a guy that he is the perfect example of draft position doesn't matter. Like this whole quarterback situation in New York is the perfect example of draft position means squat. Production is the only thing that matters. Production from the quarterback is the only thing that matters, not where they were drafted. And there are still Jet fans that are pounding the table saying, hey, just let Zach start. Let him work this out. The only reason they're saying that at this point is because they don't want to be known as the team that wasted the 2nd overall pick on a guy who's a 3rd string quarterback halfway through his 2nd year. They don't want to be known as the fan of a team that had that happen. And I understand it. I get it. But this is a team that's ready to compete potentially for a Super Bowl right now. Like, maybe Super Bowl is a little extreme, but this is a team that's ready to make a deep playoff run this year for sure. And they just need the quarterback to do it. And who's to say Mike White can't be that guy? I mean, he's been playing well. He has the support of his teammates. I mean, the whole Mike F. and White t-shirt thing started from, you saw all the players, the Jet players coming off the team playing in Minnesota, and they, like, half of them were wearing these Mike F. and White t-shirts. And that shows that he has that locker room in the palm of his hand. He has the backing of the locker room that Zach Wilson just straight up didn't have. And I know some people make the argument of like, well, Zach Wilson had the captain's badge on his jersey. It's like, yeah, I mean, but we have also heard from the Pat McAfee show that like even in the NFL, there are guys that get nominated as team captains, and other guys will look around and be like, who the fuck voted for that guy? Like that Pat McAfee said, like that's happened before in the NFL. Chances are that's probably what happened with Zach Wilson. So not confirmed. That's just my opinion. But yeah, man, this is a team that's ready to compete, and Mike White absolutely can't. Now, they're playing the Buffalo Bills this week, and I want it to be a situation where even if he lays an egg and doesn't play well, I want them to still have Mike White as their starter remainder of the year to show that, hey, man, we're backing you. We still have confidence in you. You played against arguably the best team in our conference. We want to see what you can do for the rest of the year. I feel like he deserves that chance. Zach Wilson has been given that chance constantly over this year and a half, and he's done absolutely nothing with it. So I think Mike White deserves that chance. Now, another quarterback that I alluded to that's sort of in a similar boat. Well, let me just give you some context of the situation. The San Francisco 49ers, back in 2019, had Jimmy Garoppolo as their quarterback, who they just traded for 2 years prior from the New England Patriots. They gave him a big contract. They were like, this is the guy. And he was the guy. He quarterbacked this team to a Super Bowl appearance in 2019 on a roster that was excellent, great defense, solid playmakers offensively. And Jimmy Garoppolo was the head of it all. He was the quarterback of the NFC representative in the Super Bowl that lost to the Kansas City Chiefs, but still, making the Super Bowl is not easy. 2020 hits, they made the playoffs, so it was kind of a meh season. And then 2021, it was kind of like the writing on the wall. Because earlier in that season, in the 2021 NFL Draft, the San Francisco 49ers give up a haul to move up to the third overall pick with the Miami Dolphins to take their franchise quarterback of the future, Trey Lance. So they kind of saw the writing on the wall was that Jimmy Garoppolo was not the guy in their eyes. But they kept him around because they knew Trey was not ready to play yet. He didn't really play that much his rookie year. And Jimmy was still the quarterback. And he still managed to quarterback that team to an NFC title game appearance. Now you can make the argument that he was kind of the reason they lost the NFC title game. But he quarterbacked them there nonetheless. But even after that, unless he won a Super Bowl, and even then, all indications show that he was not going to be the San Francisco 49ers quarterback for the future. He wasn't even going to be on the roster at the start of 2022. It was going to be Trey Lance's team. He was given the keys. It's Trey Lance's team. Jimmy, you did great for us, but good riddance. Until he wasn't. He was still there. And then when Trey Lance finally was given his opportunity, broke his leg in week 2, out for the year. Jimmy G, all of a sudden, is now back in the lineup, and he starts playing well. And then this past Sunday, against the Miami Dolphins, injures his ankle. Now, it's not as serious as we thought it was. He will be back for middle of January, so most likely probably for the postseason. But he gets hurt. Now you have Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo, both injured on a team that's ready to compete for a Super Bowl now. So who comes in? In comes Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy, ladies and gentlemen, comes in. He's a 7th round rookie, Mr. Irrelevant, as a matter of fact. Nobody knew who the hell he was. And comes in. He was the very last pick of the NFL draft this past year. And yet comes in and looks like an NFL quarterback. He was calm. He was collected. He didn't look like a regular rookie quarterback who would come in like all fidgety and just scared shitless like a duck out of water. Just, oh God, what do I do? No, he came in, led the offense, cool as the day can be, and led the Niners to a 33-17 victory over an excellent Miami Dolphin football team. So, who is Brock Purdy? So, a lot of you are wondering, who the hell is Brock Purdy? Brock Purdy, and this is why this whole story is so exciting to me. Brock Purdy is a guy who was coming out of Iowa State. In his freshman year, was viewed to have the IQ and the tools to one day be a future first-round pick in the NFL. There was legitimate hype around him as being a potential future first-round pick and maybe even a future Heisman Trophy winner. If he had developed his arm properly. If his arm developed a little more and his arm strength got a little bit better and got a little stronger, then everyone was like, he could be as good as he can be. He can be a future first-round pick for sure one day. Obviously, arm never developed. He didn't really gain any strength in his arm, and it led to him just sort of his draft stock plummeted all the way to Mr. Irrelevant, which is the title given to the last pick in the NFL draft. He was 2022's Mr. Irrelevant. And you know what? Credit to Kyle Shanahan for not just blowing off the final pick of the draft and taking a fucking kicker out of eastern Wyoming of Detroit or whatever the shit. But he actually was like, hey, let's screw it. Let's just take him. Let's just take a quarterback and see what happens. And yet here we are, because the two starters ahead of him get injured. The two starters that have more upside than him get injured, and now he's thrust into a starting role. Now they signed Josh Johnson over the past few days, but he's not. He's Josh Johnson. He's not starting for this team. So it seems like, at least till Jimmy G comes back in the middle of January, this is going to be Brock Purdy's team potentially for the foreseeable future. And I am so excited because Rich Eisen from the Rich Eisen Show talked about this. He said that there could be a realistic situation where the three quarterbacks in the history of the San Francisco 49ers franchise, there were only three quarterbacks that have won a Super Bowl. And those three quarterbacks could be Montana, Young, and Purdy. There is a realistic... I know it sounds batshit crazy. Because it is batshit crazy. But like I said, I just told you, this is a guy that at one point was viewed as a potential first-round pick one day, had he developed properly, and he didn't. So here he is in the NFL with a great supporting cast around him. He has George Kittle. He has Christian McCaffrey. He has Debo. He has Brandon Ayuk. He has a great O-line. He has a mauling defense. He has the pieces around him to make a Super Bowl run. Who says he can't? And same with him and Mike White, all these guys that are saying oh, well, the guys that are picked ahead of him, the higher draft picks, need to get the opportunities ahead of them because those guys are more worthy of it. I mean, I kind of talked about this in the Mike White segment, but it means jack shit. Draft position means jack shit. Because everyone's saying, now, the Niners situation is different because we haven't really seen Trey Lance play that much. I mean, he didn't start at all his rookie year. And then this year, he was given the keys, and he broke his leg in the second game of the season. So it's still up in the air if Trey Lance is good enough. With the Jets situation, we know Zach Wilson. We know what he is. We know he sucks. He's not the guy. We know that by now. With Trey Lance, that question's still up in the air. But who's to say Brock Purdy can't be the guy that take this team forward, win a Super Bowl, and all of a sudden you have him being the franchise quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers? Who's to say Mike White can't lead this team on a deep playoff run and he's the starting quarterback, he's the franchise quarterback of the New York Jets? Everyone's saying, oh, that's crazy, that's not realistic, that's stupid. Here's why it's not stupid. It's crazy, it's out of the realm of possibility. No, scratch that. It's not out of the realm of possibility. You know why? You know how I know that those situations are not out of the realm of possibility? We just spent the last 20 years of this league dominated by a quarterback who was a sixth-round draft pick who was drafted to a team that already had 4 active quarterbacks on the roster when they drafted him. So we're not going to fucking sit here and say that a late-round quarterback or an undrafted quarterback cannot be a franchise quarterback of a team. We're not going to sit here and say that when Tom fucking Brady exists. Now, I know that's the extreme example. I get that. But to say that that's not possible, knowing what the past 20 years has been, we're not just going to sit here and act like that's just a complete zero, no chance in hell of that ever happening possibility. We're not. So I'm really excited to see what both Purdy and Mike White can do for the rest of the year. If they both, I want to see them both succeed because I think it'd be really, really fun. And yeah, man, I'm excited to see what the rest of the season holds for those guys because they are surrounded by teams that are ready to compete now. So yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm pumped to see what they can do for the remainder of the year. Now, one more quarterback-specific situation that I want to talk about that happened this past week. It's less optimistic, I will say. And it's kind of actually a sad situation when you think about it in the full context. Baker Mayfield, quarterback of the Panthers, requested his release on Monday, I believe. Was put on waivers, and just yesterday was claimed off of waivers by the Los Angeles Rams. Now, a Rams team that is the defending Super Bowl champions, but completely imploded. They've had some injuries. Matthew Stafford's presumably out for the year. And they basically all but gift wrapped the top 10 pick for the Detroit Lions essentially this year. But I'm not going to talk about the Rams in this case because I talked about the Rams last week. In this situation, I want to talk about Baker Mayfield because Baker Mayfield is such a sad situation because he had a story that could have been an all-time great story and still can be. He was a guy who wasn't that recruited highly out of high school, walked on at Texas Tech, was given the starting job after walking on. Then things didn't work out there. Transferred to Oklahoma, walked on the Oklahoma Sooners football team. So he's a 2-time walk-on already. Walked on at Texas, walked on at Oklahoma, 2-time walk-on, and won the Oklahoma starting job. Then proceeded to win the Big 12, win the Heisman Trophy, and do well enough to be drafted number 1 overall by the Cleveland Browns. There's never been even a 1-time walk-on that's been able to accomplish what Baker Mayfield did in college, let alone a 2-time walk-on. And when he got into the NFL, he was drafted to a terrible Browns team, arguably the worst team in NFL history, an 0-16 Browns team the year before, goes there, starts after week 3, and immediately gives a spark and immediately gives hope to the city of Cleveland, where he sets the rookie record for touchdown passes in a season, at the time at least. And all of a sudden, it was just this hope of, yeah, Baker's the guy. And then you started seeing him in commercial after commercial. God damn it, how many progressive commercials did you see this fucker in? Too much. I'm going to tell you right now, too much. But that happens. 2019, they get all this hype. They traded for Odell. Didn't work out because Freddie Kitchens was a fraud as a head coach. Then 2020 rolls around, and then they make the playoffs. They go on a run, make the playoffs for the first time since 2001, win a playoff game on the road against the big brother Pittsburgh Steelers, and they didn't just beat the Steelers, they destroyed them. Who was the quarterback of that team that helped them make the playoffs for the first time in 20 years? Helped them win a playoff game for the first time since 1994? Baker Mayfield. As a matter of fact, they were one fluky Chad Henne run from hell away from beating the Kansas City Chiefs in the divisional round that year. They were that close to making the AFC title game that year. And who knows? They would have played the Buffalo Bills. Who knows what would have happened? So, and that was the moment where it was official. Baker is the quarterback of the future for this team. He was on top of the world. And then 2021 hit and everything just went straight to hell. He got injured, played well at the start of the year, but then got injured, tried playing with that injury and did not look good. In fact, he tried to help his team because he felt like he still gave his team the best chance to win. Actually ended up hurting his team and hurting himself more. And then they traded for he who shall not be named. And they basically spat in the face of a guy, the Browns organization, that is, spat in Baker's face, a guy who played for them hurt, tried to do everything he can to help them win, and they basically were just like, deuces, bro. He requested his trade, got traded to the Panthers, started a few games, did not look good, got benched in favor of P.J. Walker, and then when P.J. Walker got benched, they brought back Sam Darnold, and he's starting for them now. And at that point, I think Baker just saw the writing on the wall and was like, hey, I want my release. And here we are now on his third team in just over a year. And what a fall from grace. Literally 2 years ago, he was viewed as a guy who could potentially be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL and be the franchise quarterback that the Cleveland Browns have not had since Bernie Kosar back in the 80s. He was viewed as that guy. He was definitely the best quarterback they had since Bernie Kosar. And it's just so sad how a guy just within 2 years went from that to where he is now, where he's not going to be the starter for the Rams next year, now with Matthew Stafford coming back. But this is basically his last-ditch effort, essentially, to play, show some teams film of him that makes a team want to consider him as their starter potentially for next year. So, who knows? He could come in, play really well, give a team that might have need a quarterback, give him something there, and then on like a 1 or 2 year deal, and then see what happens from there. Or there's also a really likely chance that he comes for the Rams, plays terribly, and he's going to have to face the reality of him having to pay a backup in this league. And it sucks, but it's true. And that's the harsh reality of playing quarterback in the National Football League. There's not a lot. There's only 32 jobs. There's only 32 jobs available to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. And he's going to have to face the reality soon that there is a strong chance that he might not end up being one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the NFL. And it sucks because I like Baker. I like Baker as a player. You know, Baker always got hate. I thought it was overblown. I understood why, but I always just thought it was a bit too out there. But yeah, man, it's just so sad to see how this story has turned out. And I really hope he does get a redemption arc because we are in an NFL now where we see Geno Smith, who was terrible as a starter for the Jets in his first 2 years in the league, and then bounced around as a backup for about 5 years, finally is given the opportunity to be a starter yet again, and he is running away with it. He was an MVP candidate for a while. Like, in some cases, still is, but he's helped take the Seahawks team that was supposed to be competing in the Bryce Young sweepstakes to being a team that can legitimately win their division and potentially even make noise in the playoffs. So that's where we're at now. This is the NFL we live in, where Geno Smith can be a legitimate top 15 to top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Who say Baker can't eventually be that again? So he's shown that he can. He's shown that he can be, with the right cast around him, that he can be a great quarterback and a good to great quarterback in this league. But certain situations just have occurred, and have written a different story for him. And it's really sad to see how it's developed. It really has. One last thing that I want to talk about is it's a little bit, I want to end it on a positive note because I didn't want to just end it on the Baker story. But I think we are, after this weekend, we have found a brand new rivalry in the National Football League. This year, going into this year at least, we thought the all-time rivalry that we had to look forward to every single year was going to be Chiefs-Bills, which it still is. I mean, matchup of the two best quarterbacks in the NFL, Mahomes and Allen. It was viewed as it's this generation's equivalent to Brady and Manning, where it's like those two quarterbacks are the best in the NFL, and they're meeting once a year, and we're going to see how this plays out. And it was viewed as the same with Mahomes and Allen. But there's a certain someone, there's a certain shiesty in Cincinnati that might have a few things to say about that. Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, I'm not going to go so far as to say that they are the best team in the NFL, but holy shit, they're really goddamn close. So, Joe Burrow, it is safe to say that he is at worst the third best quarterback in the NFL. You can't really change my mind otherwise on that. He is legitimately a top 3 quarterback in the NFL, and he's rivaling Mahomes and Allen to be basically giving people real thought of what order you put all 3 of those guys in. And it's so fun to watch. And this Bengals team that we were so concerned coming into the year of like, all right, was this like a 2017 Jaguar situation where they have one great year and then they just go back to being the team we thought they were? We have seen this year that they have not become that. They started out the year 0-2, which in today's league, we always say, like, today starting 0-2 in today's NFL is almost a death sentence because you're not going to make the playoffs starting the year 0-2 because of how competitive the league is. Well, guess what? They're going to make the playoffs almost certainly because the Ravens are no longer really a threat to them because Lamar's injury, and we don't know how long he's going to be out for. Even when Lamar was playing, he didn't have that same fear factor of the Ravens that you might have once had. But this is a Bengals team that's also one of the more complete units in the NFL, where you have Joe Burrow, you have the triple-headed monster at wide receiver in Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, and T. Higgins. The third of those, Higgins, he might actually be this team's number 1 wide receiver. I know that sounds crazy to some people because Jamar Chase is the bigger name, but statistically, is this team's number 1, Higgins is. And even when you just watch the team, he's a phenomenal he's a phenomenal talent. And when you watch teams on defense, when they put their number 1 corner to follow the other team's number 1, they don't follow Jamar Chase around that much. They follow around T. Higgins because they realize, hey, he could be a legitimate threat more than Chase is. And Chase is a whole other beast in and of himself. And Higgins might actually even be better than Jamar Chase. You can legitimately make that argument. So it's something that you look at. Joe Mixon is amazing, but he's been out for a couple games, but it doesn't matter because Samaje Perine came in against the Chiefs and just ran all over them. It's a team where you just look at it and you're just like, how the hell do you stop this? And then their defense, even though they've battled some injuries, with Chidobe Awuzie being out for the year, they've had some guys step up, like Cam Taylor-Britt has been a really good player for them. Their linebacking core, who was underrated last year, still underrated this year. They were just as good as this year as they were last year. Trey Hendrickson has still shown that he was a phenomenal signing for them. This is a Bengals team that you look at, and it's confident. I have all confidence in the world of looking at this team and saying, there is an upper echelon of teams. There is an elite of the elite. There is a tier of teams that is the legitimate Super Bowl contenders. They are up there in the Playboy Mansion by themselves, essentially. And those teams are the Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, and the Philadelphia Eagles have entered this year. I think it's safe to say the Cincinnati Bengals are now in that upper echelon of NFL royalty, essentially, at least for the 2022 season. Because you just look at this team, and like I said, they're almost impossible to stop, because you look at this team, like, at least with those other three teams, the Chiefs, Bengals, and Eagles, lesser so the Eagles, more so the Chiefs and Bills, are teams you look at and say, like, they're phenomenal, but they're like small weaknesses that you're like, all right, we got to attack that because they're not as good as that as some people might think they are. With the Bengals, it's like, anyway, with the Chiefs, to give it some context, like, the Chiefs are not like as explosive as they were last year with Tyreek Hill being gone, but they're still effective offensively, but their defense is not as good. I mean, it's always kind of been suspect in recent years. I personally think Dean Spagnuolo is overrated as a defensive mind. I personally think that. But yeah, the defense is not that good for the Chiefs. The Bills, they've seemed to have corrected against New England, but their running game, like their lack of a running game and their over-reliance on the pass and just Josh Allen in general, is going to hurt this team eventually in the future. And then with the Eagles, that I've said is the most complete team in the NFL, even they have like some weaknesses. Like, their defense isn't as great as you would think it is. With the Cincinnati Bengals, it's like, well, what exactly is this team's weakness? Like, they have a great quarterback, they have great receivers, they have great running backs, they have a decent O-line, they have a really good defense. What is the weakness of this team? There really is none. So it's so fun to watch this team because you know that they are now a legitimate contender, and last year was not just a fluke. And it's going to be really fun. Like, I cannot wait for the playoffs to come, because I want to see, especially in the AFC, who actually comes out and heads to Arizona, because this is going to be a bloodbath come January, and I am all here for it. And when you look at those teams in the AFC, you look at the Bengals against like some of those other teams in the AFC, I feel confident in saying the Bengals could win in every single one of those potential scenarios or potential matchups. Like, the Chiefs, they have the Chiefs number. They've played them the last 3 meetings against the Chiefs. The Bengals have won all 3 of those games by 3 points exactly, actually. This is going to be a really, really fun season for a really fun postseason, now that we know the Bengals are a legit force to be feared. I mean, we kind of knew this, but the game against Kansas City confirmed it. So I'm really excited to see what this Bengals team looks like moving forward, and also what this AFC playoffs are going to be shaping out very soon in a month. But with that being said, that is all the time that we have on today's show. Like I said, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and share the content if you enjoy this. And also, if you haven't already, please go follow me on Twitter at DDS_pod. And if you'd like to support me, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. And those links will be in the description down below. I will be back on Sunday night to live stream Chargers, Dolphins. Then I'll be back next week from today for a podcast, and then the cycle will continue. That being said, I'm Double Diesel. Peace.